All right, good afternoon, folks. Thanks for your patience while we get started here today. I'd like to welcome you all to Mental Health Awareness, Crisis, and Ethical Considerations. For those who don't know me, my name is Alexis Alvarez. I'm the Director of Statewide Training at Florida Legal Services. And I'm extremely happy to bring this training to you today, along with our partners who are presenting, because it's a much needed topic that we can never get enough training on. Here we have two people who are really ingrained in the field who are going to teach us and let us navigate this world with them. So before I get into the introductions, I'd like to put some housekeeping announcements out there. This course was approved for CLE credit. That CLE code will be announced at the end of the program. I will also drop it into the chat, and I will also display it on the screen. Fancy new thing I'm going to try to do. This is also being recorded. A copy of the recording, along with that CLE information, will be emailed out to each one of you, even if you have to hop off early, even if you weren't able to attend the full time or at all. So don't worry, if you miss it on the screen or you miss it in the chat or you don't hear it, you will receive it in that email. That email will come from Zoom. It will not come from my direct email. However, I will drop my email into the chat. That way, if someone misses it or has a question or doesn't see it in their inbox, you can always reach out to me directly. So the closed captioning should be on. That's my second piece of housekeeping announcements. I know in my webinar last Tuesday, I had some trouble with the closed captionings. It looks like Zoom updated on me without telling me. So the closed captioning should be up. Anyone that's having any trouble with it or navigating the new update, please feel free to DM me in the chat. I'll try to work with you to make sure that you get those subtitles. And final piece of housekeeping announcement is questions and answers. I think I say this every time, so I'm sorry if I'm repetitive, but we really, really love hearing from you, hearing your thoughts, hearing your questions, and making as much of this educational and discussion piece. And this is a topic that I think a lot of us have questions on or need clarification and might be shy. So I say, don't be shy. Drop your questions into the chat or the Q&A, and we will do our best to answer them when the time is appropriate, at least at the very end, if we aren't able to get to them during the presentation. And so with that being said, I am going to move into introductions. So today with us here today, we have Theresa Prichard. Theresa is the Chief Executive Officer at Gulf Coast Legal Services. She previously worked at the Florida Council Against Sexual Violence as Associate Director and General Counsel. Prior to that, she spent over 5 years as an attorney at Legal Services of North Florida, representing domestic and sexual violence survivors in immigration and family law matters. Today, we also have with us Robin Graber, and Robin is the Director of Programs for the Florida Council Against Sexual Violence. In this role, he provides training and technical assistance to Florida's certified sexual assault programs around the state. He started his career in prevention of sexual violence within the school systems before moving to advocacy work directly with survivors of sexual and domestic violence. And before I turn it over to our speakers, I do want to say this is going to be some sensitive topic, sensitive subject matter, and it might be triggering for some folks. So if this is something that you're starting to feel triggered by or you need to step away from, please feel free to do so. Like I said, you'll get a copy of the recording and maybe you can pick it back up at a time that is better for you. But I just want folks to know that please, feel free to take care of yourself while we learn really about how to take care of others. So with that being said, I am going to turn it over to our speakers. Thank you so much for being here, both of you, and thank you so much for teaching us about this important subject here today.
Thank you, Alexis. We're so very happy to be here and excited to present this information to you. And thank you for that lovely introduction. And I'm so excited. As Alexis mentioned, I recently left the Florida Council Against Sexual Violence to join Gulf Coast Legal Services. I'm very excited to be here at Gulf Coast Legal and kind of be back in the trenches doing, well, I'm not personally representing clients, but working with an amazing team that's focused totally on direct legal services to folks in our communities. But this training does give me an opportunity to connect with Robin again and get to work with him about on some of these very important topics. And I am in charge of the slides, so I'm going to be taking my time here, making sure I'm doing it right. And Robin, Robin or Alexis, like Alexis said, if you guys have questions, please jump in with questions. We do, I believe these trainings are for the participants, and Robin and I came up with information that we think is important, but also this is your space. So if you have questions you want answered and we are able to answer them within the time that we have here, we are happy to do so. And then if we need to look it up or refer you to someone else, we are also happy to do that as well. But please take this time to throw out the answers or the questions that you have, and make this time. This isn't just about me and Robin telling you what we think you need to know, but also being open to your questions and feedback as well.
And
So, oh, I'm sorry, Alexis, go ahead.
No, it's okay. I just want to let folks know that there is some setting that I have going on that is preventing the speakers from turning on their video. Like I told you, Zoom has updated on me and has not given me the courage to figure it out. So folks, I am trying to figure that out in the background. I sincerely apologize about that.
Oh, no problem. I see Robin up there now. And since so Robin, I do see you. And I texted Robin, I'm afraid to mess with the slides now that I have it set up. Yeah, we were taking it a little bit personally, Alexis, but you weren't letting us put our cameras on. No, you're good. You're good. So you did hear Alexis introduce us, and I wanted to give a little bit of additional background to why we are here today and why kind of the background that we bring that allows us to speak on this topic today. So as Alexis mentioned, personally, I do have my entire legal career has been focused on working with victims of domestic or sexual violence. So they experience a lot of trauma. And so I've come to this presentation today with 15 years of background. I'm not a licensed social worker. I didn't go to undergrad. I was in a psychology major. I just want to be very clear. I'm not a licensed clinician. I am only licensed as an attorney, and the information that I bring is from that 15 years of experience and from working with folks like Robin, who are advocates on the ground, therapists on the ground, working with survivors. So that's the experience and the lens that I'm going to be speaking from today. Additionally, before I attended law school, I did work as what was referred to as a discharge planner or a crisis counselor at a local Baker Act receiving facility in Tampa. I will not say that I was qualified for that. And unfortunately, I was fresh out of college. It was a full-time, my first salaried position. Definitely wasn't qualified for that, but I did pick up some experience that way. And unfortunately, I think that just speaks to the state of how we treat folks who are experiencing mental health disorders or mental health issues, that they would hire somebody like me. But I gave it my best. And I did pick up a lot of experience that way. And the unit that I was working on was focused on folks with co-occurring disorders. So they also had some substance abuse issues, and they were all experiencing, not all experiencing homelessness, but most of them were, and none of them were insured. So it was definitely a lower income population. There was a separate unit that dealt with insured individuals, but I do have that background as well. And then with that, Robin, did you want to add anything about your experience?
Yeah, I'll just say, kind of echoing something Theresa said, I'm also not a licensed clinical social worker or mental health counselor. I've been a victim advocate for years, too many years at this point. But so everything we're going to talk about around crisis intervention is really anything anyone can do. So you don't have to be an expert in mental health to be able to just kind of help someone in that moment and then help guide them to the right place from there. So we're definitely not trying to turn you into therapists by any means. Really just make sure you kind of have those immediate skills in the moment to help someone and then get them to the right place from there.
Thanks, Robin. And yes, and with that said, we did want to focus this training on those of you who might not be trained therapists. I know some attorneys, especially in the legal aid or nonprofit field, might have an undergrad degree, or I know at FSU there was a dual program where you could get your law degree and your social work I think, a master's in social work. So some of you might have that background. But for the most part, this training is geared toward nonprofit legal aid, social justice attorneys, awesome people who need CLEs or just wanted to sit through this on your lunch break. If you're one of those people who keeps track of or keeps up on your CLEs and isn't frantically trying to get CLEs, or just really interested in the topic. So, and like Robin said, we're going to be kind of focusing on this from the perspective of somebody who's maybe not necessarily working with somebody who came to you with a legal issue that directly deals with their mental health. So probably not Baker attorneys working with folks who are facing a Baker Act proceeding. If you're a criminal legal attorney and you're working on cases where competency might be a defense or might come up in your cases, those are really detailed. And probably a lot more information that we're going to be giving you today. So we wanted to focus, because there is so much information out there. We've really wanted to focus on those practitioners who you're seeing clients. They're very vulnerable. They're experiencing a lot of hardship in their lives, legal and non-legal. And through the course of the representation, they start experiencing some crises or exacerbate, they might have a mental health diagnosis that is exacerbated through the course of representation. So really something that pops up through the course of representation that maybe you weren't expecting, or maybe you anticipated potentially happening, and then did arise during the course of your representation. And we know that the populations we see when we are doing nonprofit social justice legal aid work, that a lot of our clients, for various reasons that we will touch on, have a higher kind of risk or higher factors for experiencing mental health issues. Robin, do you want to add to that?
No, I think that's perfect.
Okay, I'll let you go over the agenda because I've been talking way too much.
Yes, so we're going to go over just some general terminology, really look at best practices working with folks, especially who may have those disorders. Then we'll do that crisis intervention 101 that I mentioned. We actually are going to talk about a case that Theresa had. So this is a real case that she dealt with, and she'll tell you how she dealt with it. And then we'll also give a chance for you all to kind of share what you think went right, went wrong, what you might have done differently now. I think that'll be an interesting discussion. We'll talk about some crisis intervention for folks who have those additional barriers as well. And then really look at some of those ethical considerations too, before getting into your own mental health, because I am a big believer, Theresa and I both, on self-care for everyone, but especially for you all with the work that you do. It's important to take care of your mental health, just as important as working with your clients and providing that crisis intervention as well. And then of course, we'll end with any questions. And then, like Alexis said, feel free to put the questions throughout and we'll try to answer them in the section that they go with, or we'll hold them to the end, depending on what it may be. So I can jump in, Theresa, if you want me to with this one.
That'd be great.
These are just some of the kind of verbiage that we wanted to share with you all, things that you might have seen or might have heard, and just to make sure that we're kind of all on the same page together. So if you hear the word psychosis, we're really looking at those conditions that affect the mind where there's been some loss of contact with reality. I can tell you myself, I've worked with several clients who might see things or see other people there, or might not really understand that they're where they are right now, that they're with me, that we're talking, and that's that psychosis moment right there. We work with them just the same way that we work with anyone and really provide that same support as much as we can. Of course, recognizing that there are just some pieces we may not be able to do. A mood disorder is the mental illness where the problem really affects their emotional state. So really thinking kind of like depression would be a mood disorder. And really kind of seeing that those could happen, could come up while you're working with someone in that moment, where maybe one day they're with you and they're great, they're very bubbly, they're telling you everything they need, and the next time they're with you, they're in a completely different emotional state. And then of course, substance use disorder is really leading someone who can't control that use of substances, whether that's alcohol or drugs, or other types of drugs, just really someone who is unable to control those things. And so same kind of thing, they may come in acting very differently the next time you meet with them. And that may be because they are on that substance at that time, or even experiencing withdrawals if they're trying to get off of those substances in that moment as well.
Thanks, Robin. So we wanted to talk a little bit about mental health terms and just generally when we're talking about these issues, just to remember that language does matter, and how we refer to folks who might be experiencing crisis or might have a diagnosis. And that these terms and preferred terms change frequently, excuse me. And I was looking, I know I once came across a website where there's a whole list of terminology and preferred terminology. And I was trying to find it to pop into this presentation. And for the life of me, I just couldn't come up with it to put it in here. And I can't remember where I saved it. But if I ever am able to find that, I will send it to Alexis, because that was very helpful. Because even when we think we're not using potentially harmful language, there could be a reason, and it's constantly changing, right? As folks who are experiencing maybe certain conditions or certain populations, as their voices become stronger within society, and we learn more about various people and kind of how they prefer to be referred to, or their conditions referred to, it's constantly changing. So we understand that not all language is necessarily harmful, but just we want to try to be as conscious and aware of it as possible. And I might even slip up during this presentation. And so please feel free to chat me. This actually happened in the last presentation I did for FLS a few months ago, where someone kind of called my attention to some language that I used that wasn't necessarily meant to be harmful, but that could have been better. And that is just not the preferred terminology. So definitely avoid straight up derogatory terms, and you know what those are. I'm not even gonna use them here today. But also terms like crazy, insane, psycho, definitely those are things that those are words we don't want to use when talking about folks who are experiencing mental health issues or concern or diagnoses. Don't generalize. So a person is not their illness. And this is one of those things where it's probably not meant to be harmful, but over time it kind of leads to this idea and these beliefs. So instead of saying so-and-so is depressed, say they have depression, because they're more than just a diagnosis or the crisis they're experiencing in that moment. So, and this is where I might slip up today, you guys. So try to focus on saying they have depression, or people with a mental illness or pre-existing mental health disorder. Robin, did you want to add anything before I move on?
No, that's perfect.
Okay. So I wanted to, and I touched on this when I was further introducing myself in best practices. I really support in the work that I've done. As I mentioned, I'm not a therapist. I'm not a licensed clinical social worker. I don't have a psychology degree. So really what has helped me throughout my career is partnerships and collaboration with folks like Robin. And primarily because my legal practice has focused on victims of violence, victims of interpersonal violence. A lot of those relationships and collaboration have been with victim advocates at the local rape crisis centers or domestic violence shelters. So those have been my main points of contact. There are obviously community providers who are working with folks who have mental health disorders or mental health issues. So you might also work with them. And sometimes it doesn't even have to be formal with related to a specific case, but I might just talk to Robin like, hey, if this comes up, I'm just curious if this comes up, and just kind of teaching myself that way and bouncing ideas off of him. And honestly, that's where a lot of my awareness around the language and being patient or being understanding with how my clients might be behaving has really helped. Bouncing it off of somebody like Robin has really helped me in my practice and evolve as an attorney, because I did not start out this way, you guys, as a staff attorney. So if you are working with somebody and partnering, if you have, if you're a nonprofit and you have MOUs in place, that can be really important. Some memorandum of understanding with various organizations that can help you ahead of time if you need to call on them for help. Always honor the privacy and confidentiality of your clients. So if you have a release form, like, hey, I really want to talk to somebody about this, and get a release form from your client, or just speak very generally about the question that you have. So be mindful, of our obligations, our ethical obligations around confidentiality. Robin, do you want to talk about knowing your client? Because I feel like you touch on this later.
Yeah, I mean, really just kind of knowing what they need, knowing what might be the best for them. And so especially, like Theresa mentioned, we have domestic violence and sexual assault advocates all throughout the state of Florida. We're really lucky that we have certified centers throughout the entire state, that if even, maybe you're helping them in a different case, but they've mentioned they've been a victim of some kind of abuse, they're still eligible for all of our services, which means if they are kind of coming into crisis or being triggered, you can know that you can refer them to us and help them get into services with us. One thing I'll just tell you, when I was a victim advocate, is that I often went with my clients to all sorts of court cases, even unrelated to the criminal sexual battery. So I attended criminal drug cases where I had teenagers picked up with marijuana, but I would go with them because just being in the court system was triggering for them based off of the way their assault occurred. So even though that's not my primary reason that they're going through the court system right now, I still attend with them and provide that crisis intervention so that their attorney can really just focus on their case. So it's a great way to really just understand what your client needs and help them kind of navigate where might be the best fit for them. And I can tell you our website, fcasb.org, does list all of the rape crisis centers by county. So depending on where you're at throughout Florida, you can easily find who might be the best center for you.
And that was a great partnership. I feel kind of spoiled that I had that through my career, especially at FCASB, where a lot of our clients came in because they were clients of the Rape Crisis Center, and that's how they were referred for legal services. So they were often working with an advocate, and that advocate could alert me ahead of time if there was a specific, if they already had a pre-existing condition that was diagnosed, and really having them in court, having an advocate in court, like Robin said, to focus on if there's crisis or if they're experiencing, if they're feeling distressed, or that what is so invaluable. If you have the resources and the local program has the resources and you have that relationship, I definitely support building those relationships with the DV shelters, with the rape crisis centers, with community health providers. And again, it comes down to if they have the resources as well. And but that is very helpful. In, when I was at the council, we built our legal program around the concept of a holistic approach. So it wasn't just we're working on your legal case, your injunction, or your divorce, or your Title IX case, but also we're working very closely with your advocate, with your therapist, to safety plan, emotionally safety plan around your case, physically, if there were physical safety issues, to work around that. So I know we're all really busy and it can get overwhelming sometimes. So having those partnerships and collaborations are really important. And I learned so much from them. And then communicating open and honestly with your clients. They are, no matter what they're going through, and we will touch on this when we get to, for sure, we're going to touch on this when we get to my case discussion. But communicate open and honestly with them, even if it's bad, even if it's like not great news for them. If you think they don't have a great case, take that time to communicate with them. They deserve it. They're entitled to it. Even if somebody is experiencing crisis or maybe does have a diagnosis, a psychotic diagnosis, they deserve to have they deserve that information and to be able to participate as much as possible. So remember, these are people we're dealing with. So be open and honest with them and let them work with you through, if they do have a case, make sure to work with them through it. And yeah, open communication, you can never go wrong with communication. So now, Robin, here you go.
So this is typically the phrase when I'm training kind of like new advocates. This is the example I give them for crisis. So I'm just going to read it out. An acute disruption of psychological homeostasis in which one's usual coping mechanisms fail, and there exists evidence of distress and functional impairment. The subjective reaction to a stressful life experience that compromises the individual's stability and ability to cope or function. I really stress the subjective reaction because I think that's something that we don't think about with triggers and folks with trauma or mental health concerns, that for me, it may not be an issue at all, but for them, that's going to be a trigger that causes them to go into a state of crisis. And so that's their reaction based on whether it's their past, their mental health diagnosis, whatever it may be. And kind of to what Theresa was just saying on the last slide about that communication, that's something that I see often with folks in trauma, because trauma is a lack of control. When they don't have their information, they start to feel that lack of control again, and it can be a trigger for them. So even just simple updates to folks who you know might be more likely to go into crisis, just saying like, hey, we're still waiting on things. It's just the waiting game right now, but here's everything's good. Letting them know those simple things as well can be really helpful. And like Theresa said, I know you're busy, so it can be simple emails to the person, or depending on how you do it, text messages, things like that, just saying like, hey, we're still waiting on XYZ, but everything's good to go right now, because it will just provide them that way to de-stress and way to come back down from that crisis. And then with the work that we do when we trade advocates, we use what's called the RIDES method of crisis intervention. You'll notice an A at the end as well, though. We're going to talk about some self-harm piece too, but one thing I always say with folks is that with the RIDES method, you're not necessarily doing all of these in this order, but that these are the things that work to help someone come down from a crisis situation. So you're doing a lot of relationship building. Probably for the most part, you will have already done some of this just working with the client. You'll really know them at that point, understand their situation. But simple things, just talking with that warm, softer tone, really just listening and hearing them out can help them feel like they have a connection with you. Identifying the problem is really just helping them to understand what it seems that they're upset about. So listening to what they say, and then a lot of times just kind of rephrasing, you know, it sounds like you're really upset that this happened. It sounds like you're really angry that the court date got pushed again, and really helping them identify that feeling as well. And that goes into the dealing with feelings, really helping them put a name to their feeling. A lot of survivors in that crisis moment, and really anyone going through a crisis moment, you know, I always refer back to survivors, but anyone in that crisis moment, there's so many emotions going on that a lot of times they can't understand what it is that they're feeling. So you're helping just put a name to that feeling and really naming it for them as well, so that they can feel heard and feel seen. And a lot of times that's what people need in that crisis moment. They just need to know that someone is hearing them and someone is seeing them. You'll then explore options, and that's really just looking at what can we do to help in this situation. Sometimes, right, there may not be a lot you can do, but even as simple as, you know, it seems like there's still a lot going on. You might want to talk to someone. Can I give you the number to X place? And whether that's one of the domestic violence or sexual assault centers, whether that's a counselor in the community, whatever that may be, but helping them find the right place in that moment. And then, of course, looking at their safety. And in general, that's just making sure that they're safe, whether that's from the person who maybe caused them harm or caused them trauma, or safety of themselves. And that's where, with concerns for self-harm, in my work, we really looked at folks and used what we call the PALI assessment, PALI. So if someone is disclosing to us that they are experiencing suicidal ideations, do they have a plan? Is it actionable? So is it something they can actually do? Is it lethal? So is it something that's actually going to kill them? And is it imminent? So are they planning to do it soon? And if all of those things are met, that's where we need to engage law enforcement and do a Baker Act in that moment. For myself, in the programs that I've worked in, we really try not to Baker Act as much as we can. And so we really look at, can we help talk them down? Can we get them connected to whether it's the suicide hotline or to a mental health professional in that moment, rather than having to Baker Act them. But if push comes to shove and that's the only thing that's going to save them, then really looking at how do we go through that Baker Act. And in our case, we notify law enforcement, who will come out and do their own assessment as well. And then we'll go from the Baker Act from there. A key thing with the PALI that's really helpful is a lot of times folks who are in crisis may say things without really meaning them. And so may say things around, I just wish I wasn't here anymore, or it would be better if I didn't exist. They may be feeling that in the moment, but they may not actually be planning to do anything about that. And that's where we are really assessing, you know, what do you mean by that? Tell me a little bit more about what you mean when you say you wish you weren't here right now. And assessing, are they saying that they're going to go home and maybe do something that causes them to be killed by suicide? If not, right, let's see what we can do to help them. Maybe they do need to go talk to someone. Maybe they're just experiencing this moment of frustration and anger, and that's okay too. Or maybe this is the level that we need to involve that mental health professional right away, or law enforcement right away. And in that case, we're going to talk through that as well. So those are kind of the bare bones things that when someone goes into crisis, you're really just listening to them, you're helping them and giving them that chance to process. One key thing especially is that you're giving them that safe place to process, right? So, in the middle of the courtroom, you can't start screaming and yelling at the judge. That's how you get arrested. But I know that I might be able to come back into your office as my attorney and cry and scream and just need to get it off my chest because you're that safe place for them. And so that's the nice thing as well, that when you build that relationship with them, you're able to be there for that moment when they're needing to kind of talk through or needing to go through what they're going through. One other thing I'll mention, and then I think we go right into the case example, which will be a good case example for you, is you may also have someone who goes into crisis due to that psychosis. Maybe they're seeing somebody else there, maybe they're seeing something else happening there. One thing that I will tell you just as a safety for yourself is that if someone is believing that someone else is in the room and maybe talking to them, you don't want to tell them that that person is not there. A lot of times that will kind of turn for them. They'll make them want to yell at you that they're a liar, that you think I'm crazy. Usually I just don't engage with that part. And so instead I'm just engaging with my client. So maybe my client is talking to someone they see in the corner of the room, and that's okay. I'm going to talk to my client though. What do you need right now? How are you feeling right now? Tell me what's going on right now. And really just talking directly with that survivor and not engaging with the psychosis episode right then. Theresa, I don't know if you have anything you'd want to add there.
No, thank you for sharing that, Robin, because I think something to remember is that's really helpful to hear how to respond when somebody might be exhibiting those signs in your office, and to remember that for them it is real. So, telling them that it isn't real, and again, we're not doctors, or, so telling them that that's not helpful anyway, but just to remember that it is real for them. And when I was at the Baker Act receiving facility here in Tampa, and then later as a law student, I did that. There was this exercise, there was this program where you would put on, I don't know if you guys have done this, you would put on headphones and watch a computer screen, and you were like standing in line at Publix, and the headphones you would hear this background noise from the store, and then increasingly you would hear these voices, and they were like a little bit softer, and then they would get louder, and there were different voices saying things, and you knew it was an exercise. And I did it twice, and by the end of the exercise I was overwhelmed, even though I knew it wasn't real. That is what somebody some people who experience psychosis might hear, if they're, when we talk about hearing voices, that might be what they're experiencing, obviously on a different level, because I was in it knowing that it wasn't real. They don't know that. For them, it is real. Coming back to the communication piece, Robin and I are kind of like just really focusing on this, and to give you guys an example that really hit it home for me. When I first started at the council, I was in my first year at the Florida Council, and I received a phone call from a survivor on like a Monday, and she was very upset and very angry and frustrated. The criminal case against her abuser or perpetrator had ended the week before. She was very just livid and wanted to vent to me about it. And so I listened to her, and it turns out that the perpetrator had been convicted, which is very rare, just as an aside, very, very, very rare in sexual assault cases. I think I did that. I think we went through that slide in my previous, the presentation I did a few months ago. But I was like, oh, okay, well, and being new at the council, even though I wasn't a new attorney, I didn't really understand why she was upset. But it turns out the prosecutor hadn't communicated with her that he was even being sentenced that day. And she found out about it after the fact. She couldn't be there. She couldn't attend. She didn't have a voice through that process. Literally, I'm not even kidding, 2 days later, I got a call from a survivor who just wanted to tell me how great the criminal legal process went for her. And she was telling me about it. And I'm like, oh, okay, your perpetrator was convicted. He was not convicted, he was acquitted. But she had such great communication from the prosecutor that for her, it was a great experience because she felt like she was believed and she was listened to and that she had a voice in the process. So always remember that these, again, this is their case. It's not my case, it's their case. It's their life that's going to be impacted. So, and I wish I were making up that example because then it, you know, hopefully it would mean that that first survivor hadn't had that experience, but that truly happened within about 48 hours. I got both of those phone calls. And that was really eye-opening for me about how important communication is. So with that, we're going to transition into my case example. And so I'm going to tell you guys about a case that I had as a really fresh out of law school, within 2 years out of law school, attorney at Legal Services of North Florida. And we had a great team up there where we talked about cases and everybody was working on different things. And I know you guys have teams like this at your agencies as well. But this is one of the cases I did talk through with my more experienced attorneys at the firm. And I'm going to talk it through with you guys, and we're going to focus on maybe the crisis intervention or the mental health awareness pieces. I want you to try to suspend, I'm going to go into very general facts, so try to suspend your attorney brains in terms of strategically what motion I could have filed or XYZ. We're going to focus more on maybe some of the softer skills and responding to somebody who is in crisis. So I was working with a 55-year-old professional woman. So she had a full-time, very well-paying job. And she drove a luxury car. And I'm throwing that in there because I think that's probably going to be useful for you as you process this. She came to me very well dressed. She was seeking protection from her estranged husband. He was stalking her. So she didn't, and to be honest, this was about 14 years ago. I don't recall if there was a physical abuse or that we had a lot of evidence of physical abuse. If there was, her main concern was he was stalking her and making threats against her. We had a witness who was a coworker for her because what I can recall is one of the main allegations is he had stalked her at work. So we filed an injunction for protection and we had a whole contested hearing before the judge. The husband was pro se. He did show up, he presented, my client showed up, presented very well dressed for court. Dressed better than I was because I was a 2-year staff, very underpaid staff attorney. So my client was dressed better than I was. Her husband showed up, he was well dressed, he presented very well, which we know abusers do, right? So just keep that in mind, but he did present very well. We had a very kind, compassionate judge. We actually had a judge who was filling in for one of the regular injunction judges. So and that might have worked out in my favor because he was a very kind, compassionate judge. And I know you don't always see those. It's so unfortunate, but I know you guys who do these types of cases don't always see that. Husband showed up, he started, you know, he wasn't presenting as angry. He started making some comments and my client was getting increasingly distressed, obviously, which is very common. So the judge turned to her and asked her some questions. And I had met with her multiple times to prepare her case. This was one of those cases where I actually had that luxury. And I know that's not always the case for a lot of you guys, or in a lot of these cases that we have so much time to prepare, but I actually had some time to prepare this case. She started making some statements that indicated that she was experiencing hallucinations. I had not, in my meetings with her, my conversations, my emails, had not experienced that from her. So the judge was concerned, understandably, and I think she was triggered. It was either distress or the husband knew, you know, to push a button. If he, you know, who knows us better than our partners? He pushed a button and she started making these statements and the judge was kind of like, whoa, let's pump the brakes here. I don't know what's going on. So if she's experiencing hallucinations, now the judge is wondering if she'd really seen her husband stalking her or making threats. So essentially what happened in that case is the judge And I wanted to see if there were any other facts I wanted to add for you guys. I mean, obviously we see in domestic violence cases, we see it when we're working with sexual violence victims, even when it's not an intimate partner, that the defense, the abuser, even if they're not represented, defense attorneys or respondents counsels, what do they try to do is they try to paint the victim as crazy. And I'm using crazy, right, because that is typically the route that they go. And we also know that rates of abuse, I just want to point out that rates of abuse on folks with mental health issues can be higher because they are vulnerable. People tend not to believe that. They're more vulnerable because society or judges or systems tend not to believe them because they might present as my client was presenting in this moment. So the judge ended up ordering a basically a psychiatric evaluation on my client. And it turns out, I know there was a whole kind of, I know I said to suspend the whole idea of motions and all of that, but there was a lot of back and forth related to that. At the end of the day, when we did get the evaluation back, it did turn out that she had a diagnosis, was diagnosed with I think it was schizophrenia or a form of schizophrenia. And she had been either managing it or it had just kind of, the distress of the case and the situation kind of exacerbated it. She was functioning very well. I mean, she kept her job, all of those things, but it did turn out that she did have schizophrenia. And I can't recall to this day if the judge issued the injunction or not. I do recall that he was very, very kind when he was talking to her, when he was ordering the psychiatric evaluation. She became very upset in that moment when, understandably, when the judge ordered the psychiatric evaluation. And I will never forget her turning to me at the table, and I can remember her face to this day, 14, 15 years later. She looked like she wasn't believed. She looked terrified of her husband in that moment. So I wanted to give you all an opportunity to kind of, I'm going to throw it out there and I'm going to be super vulnerable in this moment and throw these questions out to you guys to take a few minutes to chat into the box if you want to, into the chat box. So what assumptions do you think maybe I made? What did you make? What assumptions did maybe you guys make as I was going through that, that scenario? How could I have done things differently, or what could I have done differently? Should this case have been rejected for representation? And do you think she was lying? So we'll take, not lying, but that's not a good way of phrasing it. But do you think that maybe this was a situation where the stalking, the threats were happening or not? So you want to give it like, what, 2 minutes, Robin? Okay. Alexis, are you getting any responses?
Not yet, but the chat, I just checked, it is enabled. So folks, feel free to drop anything into the chat. You all are muted, but the chat should be accessible for everyone. Any takers?
I know y'all have opinions on this.
Now we're getting some stuff in. I'll leave it.
Here we go.
I'll leave it to Robin to pull those out.
Yes. So a couple of questions about what the coworker witnessed and what they testified to. And I don't know if you remember that, Theresa.
Okay, I do. So they testified that to her distress. So one of the allegations was she had walked to her car after work, had seen her husband who was making threats. She ran back into the building, and he or she, they testified to her, kind of her seeing her very distressed in this immediate aftermath.
And then I see, whoa, my chat box moved. Someone mentioning in her mind the terror was real, and he may have been able to manipulate that scenario. Absolutely. We have seen that from abusers definitely, where they know that their partner has that psychosis, and really gaslights them, really uses that to their advantage, unfortunately. Um, Someone said that the assumption made was that it was not not necessary to ascertain pre the hearing whether there was an underlying trigger there. The client should still be accepted so long as they have capacity to consent to the representation. Always a good thing to make sure you have is that capacity to consent. Assuming she had no mental health issues, perhaps due to being well dressed. Oh, that you were assuming that she had no mental health issues, perhaps to being well dressed, presented well, probably had money with a nice car. Someone said there's no way for sure to know if the stalking was real or if it was a result of her illness, but it's very possible her abuser exploited or gaslighted her. I don't think she was lying and agree that her husband knew her triggers, absolutely. And when she heard the judge's ruling, it may have felt to her as validation of her possibly being called crazy in the past by the abuser, absolutely. So I'll just add, Theresa, if you don't mind.
Sure.
This is one thing where I will say, as the advocate or as someone who's been the advocate, why I really like working directly with attorneys and being able to be there with them. Because a lot of times what my role has been is to look through what are those things that might trigger you that are going to come up and what can we do in that moment to help bring you back down. Obviously a psychosis episode, little different than just someone who may is becoming overly emotional, but can still be very helpful, can still really help them be present in the moment and come back down without becoming, and I'm going to use the word, although I hate the word, hysterical. And I've worked in some very rural counties as well, where as soon as more than likely a woman becomes what they call hysterical, the judge immediately writes them off. So as the advocate, we do a lot of work too, when you start to feel those emotions coming, how do we bring you back to this moment? And whether that's maybe something physical, they can be touching, or just different methods to really bring them out of that crisis themselves. And then in some court cases, I've been able to stand with the survivor and the attorney together. And so they kind of feel that surrounding of support and can really help them in that moment as well. We had a couple other.
Okay.
Judges have a huge role in how clients feel about our system of justice, and I'm glad the judge was kind, absolutely. What basis did the judge use to order a psych evaluation of your client, the petitioner? Was there a petition filed by the ex-husband?
There was not. It was the basis of her, it was based on her making statements in open court where she was clearly hallucinating and or experiencing hallucinations. And it was very obvious, and that in the sense that she was having visual hallucinations and verbalizing that, which I think led to the judges. And there was lengthy drawn out, and I don't remember all the details, but him ordering that evaluation and then getting to the evaluation, that was a very drawn out fight. So, and I really love all the feedback that you guys have, and that you guys were much gentler than I was anticipating. So I'm not going to need as much therapy from Robin after this training as I thought I would. You guys are processing kind of I really like to use case examples of where things didn't go well or could have been done better, because I think that's how we learn, and I'm happy to share my things that I could have done better to maybe help you guys. I think I made some really dangerous assumptions, even unconsciously or subconsciously. Which one is it, Robin? Subconsciously?
Subconsciously.
Subconsciously, thank you. See, I'm still learning stuff from Robin. Right, I assume because she was presenting very well and she wasn't working with an advocate. This is one case I had where she wasn't working with an advocate. Right, like she's maintaining a job, she has a full-time job, she makes good money, she has a nice car, she dresses really well, so she's no, I have no concerns about what might pop up in court. And so conversely, right, so I make the assumption that mental health issues only happen to lower income people, right? Like, so I made some really gross assumptions without even intending to, or that folks who have money and maybe maintain very well don't experience mental health challenges or diagnoses or get conditions. So I think that I agree. I don't think this case should have been rejected. I think if I'd known ahead of time and done a little bit more work ahead of time, I could have prepared for that, right? Could have prepared for the husband's potential response. And yes, it's very possible she wasn't hallucinating the abuse, the stalking, the threats from her husband. So, and like we know that exactly what you guys said. We know that narcissistic abusers and abusers who are typically always narcissistic, I would say, they use gaslighting as a measure, right? Like people are going to think you're crazy, exactly that. And I think so, and I love what somebody said, like the judge's response, it probably just reiterated to her what she had likely heard, that she was crazy. And I do, this really stands out in my mind because I remember the judge, I think he was doing the best he could to respond to her in a very compassionate way. And I'm just so thankful that I had that judge, because I've had judges before where they did so much harm, so much more harm, and clients wish they'd never come forward, right? And I think we hear that a lot. And I think that's possible for us too as attorneys, right? And just be aware, like, because how we respond to our clients, even if they don't have a case, you're like, oh, there's just no way, there's just no legal remedy. Just be aware of how you respond to them, because we can really do a lot of damage and kind of exacerbate the damage and the trauma. Robin, was there anything else that, before I move on to?
Just one person did ask about, did you go over with the client that the opposing party or even the judge may do something to cause your client emotional distress? And I will say, I'm not sure if you did in this case, but in general, always good to do so. And that's where I appreciate Theresa's vulnerability, because I think sometimes we can make that assumption that they don't need it because they're not presenting as someone who might go in crisis. You know, we may be thinking this is just a typical divorce proceeding. They don't really need that, not knowing that maybe there actually has been gaslighting in the relationship or other things. So I think always prepping your client that there's a chance they can always get on the stand and just say anything they want, truthfully. Even if it's a lie, they may get up there and do it. And so are you prepared for that?
Yeah, and honestly, I can't tell you if I did or not. I know over time I learned to ask, what might the other party say? You know them better than I do, because typically it's a partner. When you're working with the DV cases, it's their partner, right? Or a family member. You know them. I don't know this person. What do you think they'll say? So we could prepare that way. I don't know that I did that in this case. In this case, something that I think this would have been challenging anyway, and I'm not trying to let myself off the hook, because this is definitely a major learning opportunity, because I think that she was so high functioning that I'm not sure it would have even come up. And I've also learned to ask questions differently, right? Like you don't ask, like you might ask, hey, have you ever been diagnosed with something? Like, because a doctor diagnosed you with something. And sometimes people who are experiencing mental health issues, they don't know, right? Or they, like we said, for her, it's real. You know, she doesn't know that it's a mental health, you know, that she might have a pre-existing mental health condition, or she might not know how she's going to respond in a time of crisis. So, but I should have dug a little bit deeper and not made those assumptions. Okay, so great feedback. I love it. I love using examples so that we get audience participation. It's really helpful. Robin, you are up next.
Yes. So really just crisis intervention with clients who have additional barriers, whether that's severe mental health, they're incarcerated, or they're maybe in an inpatient facility. You'll notice all three of those look the same. We believe them, we set clear boundaries, and we kind of look for creative solutions. Like Theresa mentioned, there may not be any legal ramifications that you can use. And so can you refer them to someone else who can help them? And that's where, again, I'll say those partnerships with victim advocates or other agencies can be helpful. I often would get calls from law enforcement and from attorneys with clients who had very outlandish stories that truly there was no way it could have happened the way they're saying it happened. And a lot of times what it is that something triggered them to believe that the abuse was happening right then. So I've had clients tell me it's their dead mother who's assaulting them right now, that they're crawling through the walls. And so that's where, as the advocate, I look for ways to help break those triggers, and that's my job. And then that way, the law enforcement officer, the attorney, can help with whatever they do need to help with in that moment, or maybe they don't actually have anything after they refer them to me, and that's okay too. But just having those partnerships so that you can help them. But always, I make them feel believed. So even though internally I may know there's no way your dead mother has come back to life, I'm going to make you feel believed and get you the help you need. So as the attorney, is the same kind of thing. You don't want to look at someone, especially who's having that psychosis episode, and say, oh, well, that's not real. That can't have happened. Because that's just going to make the psychosis episode worse, versus just kind of helping them, I'm so sorry that happened to you. I think the best person to talk to would actually be the Women's Center of Jacksonville. Why don't we call their hotline together and get you an appointment set up, and just kind of refer them to the right place in that moment instead.
Did you want to touch on folks who are, Alexis, do we have until 1 or 1:30?
Okay, yeah, so we technically on paper have till 1, but no, this is being recorded, and I think the audience would agree. If folks have to drop off, they always get a copy of the recording. So if you and Robin have the time to stay on and continue, I know that the audience would appreciate it. So it's really up to you, if you can stay till 1:30, or you can stay till you finish the presentation, but everyone will get the full recording regardless of whether or not they have to drop off early.
Okay, I think I can definitely stay on, Robin. I think, yes. And we actually trimmed this down. So, okay, I'll move a little bit more quickly.
So
I'm so sorry, you guys. Okay, so we're going to touch on some ethics too. This is a little bit challenging. This was kind of challenging to put together, and I want to be very careful in how I present it, because of the fact that this is case specific, this is client specific. So I wanted to talk to you about some options that you have to look into. I'm really concerned about getting into too much detail about any one particular thing, because I can't, it's just, we can speak generally, and then it really depends on getting into the weeds of utilizing these processes depending on your client. So like Robin kind of mentioned, and we've had clients like that before. And I wanted to throw out too, on the opposite side, this never came up when I was working with Robin, when he was an advocate at a couple of the different rape crisis programs and the shelter. But we did have some advocates where we didn't maybe have a super strong relationship with them yet, but they would refer clients who were experiencing maybe psychotic episodes or having a psychotic experience, and they would punt it to the attorneys, and we were kind of like deers in the headlights because it came from the program. So they'd already gone through that process of like a crisis analysis, or an evaluation through the advocates and the crisis workers. So it puts you, and I think we mostly have mostly attorneys or all attorneys on right now, but when you are working, we started having these conversations as we were building relationships with new programs or new advocates, like, please don't punt those to us when you don't know what to do, because when we get in the position is of having that uncomfortable conversation where we think somebody maybe needs that crisis response before they can consider kind of a legal response. So, we think of ourselves as maybe like second or third tier responders. And again, I'm not talking about, attorneys who are in Baker Act court or, working with clients who are in immediate crisis. But from my perspective, working on those civil cases, at that point, it's really for somebody who, they've already, if they're going through the criminal legal system, they've already initiated that. If they're getting therapy, if they needed immediate medical care, that's already happened. And then, they're coming to me, and we're picking apart in the aftermath to see what their potential legal remedies might be. So, definitely not just to punt somebody on crisis to the attorneys. And so as attorneys, just be mindful of having those conversations. And again, that was never Robin. And, Robin might call us and say, hey, I really have somebody, they want to talk to an attorney. I don't know that they have a case, they're kind of experiencing XYZ, because then Robin, obviously on the advocate side, is dealing, trying to, because not everybody who's experiencing crisis, especially if it's a psychosis, thinks they need help. So it can be really hard to kind of get that buy-in from them. So with that said, if you have some concerns about your client competency, you can seek guardianship proceedings. I have never done this. We looked into it for a couple of cases when I was at FCASV, where we thought, do we need to, is this something we're going to have, is this a road we're going to have to go down? And it is very difficult. I think that's a difficult decision to make, because you are trying to maintain that relationship with your client as well. And that can be, you need to maintain that trust. So that's kind of that's a very stressful decision to have to make, or a question to have for yourself. So just be aware that pursuing guardianship on behalf of your client so that they can proceed through the legal proceedings is an option that's out there. You do have, so bring up, and we touched on this in the case example, right? We have a duty to the court to not bring forth frivolous claims, right? Now that case we had, I wouldn't say that was frivolous, right? There might have been some issues, and I hate to use the word credibility, but I know it comes up in court. I don't like to use it because I feel like it's used against victims and survivors too often, but the judges are, right, typically in injunction cases, domestic violence cases, civil cases, we're working with judges, not juries, on the types of cases we're working on. So the judge is evaluating each witness's credibility, and your client is a witness in that case, as well as being a party to the case. So, so we do have a duty to the court to bring forth something that, to bring forth a case that has some validity. You have something to back it up. I'm a firm believer your client's testimony is evidence. And I know I've worked with some attorneys who are like, I need something else in addition to the testimony. That's often very difficult when you're working with victims of violence. It can be very difficult to have that, especially if it's a sexual assault case. So you have to build around it. So you have to maybe build other folks' testimony as well. So I just wanted to point that out too, that when we're representing, this duty to the court, I know I had an additional duty to my client, a primary duty to my client, to have done some evaluations ahead of time to prepare. Not that I wouldn't have taken that case to court, but that I would have prepared a little bit better and been ready either for the husband to pull some gaslighting or to kind of, trigger her, and then maybe had gotten her an evaluation ahead of time instead of being in open court where she's very vulnerable and the judge is ordering an evaluation. And then just to come at it, I'm not going to really talk about this because I think we've talked about compassionate representation with the folks we're working with. So when we're looking at, and I won't spend a lot of time on this because Robin, I think, did a great job talking about this. So one of the main concerns, one of the biggest things to look out for is somebody who might be expressing suicidal ideations or making statements. And Robin gave us a great, I think it was P-A-L-I. Is that what? Robin Pally?
Pally.
To follow, and maybe we can send that to Alexa. If you have info on that, we'll send that to Alexis too. If you think you have a client, because this is really, and especially for me as an attorney, I'm like, oh my God, I had this one time where I had somebody on the phone who was making statements, and luckily my ED at the time, well, she's still an LCSW, but she was my ED at the time. And I literally ran down the hall and like, can you get on the phone? It wasn't a client at the time. It was somebody calling in. They hadn't retained us. It was just an initial call. They were clearly in crisis, and she got on the phone with that person. That you're not always going to have that when you're working with a client who might be expressing some of these thoughts or verbalizing some of these ideas. So increased risk factors, and I linked here to the 988lifeline.org, which is on our resource page. That was formerly the National Suicide hotline page, and now it's the 988. I don't know if you guys, a few months ago they rolled out, you can dial 988 if you're experiencing, if you're having suicidal thoughts. So increased risk factors are mental health disorders, loss of support, and we see this a lot with our clients. Trauma, access to means to achieve or attempt suicide. And then what else? Does anybody, we can give it like a minute if anybody wants to chat in what might be some other factors that are red flags for you guys. I know I'm running over, so I'm going to move ahead and then you guys can chat in if you come up with something. But that website does have a whole list of factors to look out for. So ethically, what do you do if your client is exhibiting signs of or verbalizing that they want to harm themselves or that they want to attempt suicide? So when a lawyer, I'm going to cut down to rule 4 -1.6b. So when you must reveal information is when you reasonably believe that releasing the information is going to help prevent the client from committing a crime or death or substantial bodily harm to themselves or another. I know we focus a lot on others, but this also covers if they are expressing thoughts of harming themselves. Now, this is very difficult, right? Because you have to make that determination. And Robin kind of ran us through it. Is this just like maybe a stressful situation, or do we need to do a little bit of information gathering to see how serious they might be, see if they have access to a weapon? So that's what we look at. And your response, if you are with an agency, I do recommend coming up. Hope maybe your agencies have policies around this already of how to respond when you have a client like this, like I would hate for you guys to be making this decision yourself and kind of walking through this, trying to make this determination yourself, right? Because we are so protective of our clients and their confidentiality. And a lot of times, like Robin said, sometimes the response is we call law enforcement, and that for our clients can just be awful. And the worst thing, a lot of them have had very, very bad experiences with law enforcement. So, so just something to be mindful of. And if you do think that they are serious, then look to rule 4-1.6b. Robin, do you want to take this?
Yeah, I also just want to say, you mentioned the policy. I would definitely see what your agency has and even see about updating it. For the agencies I've worked in, we did always have it that before a Baker Act call could be made, it always had to be staffed with another advocate or supervisor, really just to make sure that we had someone else kind of looking in and weighing in, so it wasn't on just that one advocate. The only cases where that did not happen is if they have already taken action to end their lives. So, you know, if they called our hotline and they're telling us they've already swallowed a full bottle of pills, I'm not going to staff that with another coworker. I'm just going to call 911 and really get that process started to hopefully prevent it. But for the most part, when they're talking with us and I'm doing that assessment, if I'm feeling like this might need a Baker Act, I have to bring it to another staff member first. And sometimes that's through text message or through an email while I'm still with the client, or if I feel safe enough to step out of the room and talk to that advocate. But that way it's not just on one person to really make that determination. So yes, we really just wanted to end focused on your mental health as well, because working with clients in general, but especially if you're working with clients who have a lot of these co-occurring issues, can really lead to burnout and compassion fatigue. Those are two different things, so you may have heard the words. I put the definitions there. The key thing I'll talk about for both is that both of them can lead you to feel like, I don't want to do this work anymore. I don't want to be doing this anymore. And that's what we want to try to prevent, right? Because you got into this work for a reason. So remember that you're the professional. And so you can't take everything on that your client has. You have to be that professional in the room and kind of find ways to leave that work at work as much as possible. If you'll go to the next slide. So this is kind of my joking slide. The only way to prevent burnout and compassion fatigue is boundaries, boundaries, and more boundaries. If you'll hit the next slide, Theresa, these are the ways though that you really kind of set those boundaries with clients. So I always use the phrase when I talk to advocates, don't work harder than your client. obviously I'm the expert in the room for my client. So the work that I'm doing does mean I'm doing more than my client would. But if I'm working to help my client and they just don't want anything that I'm offering, it doesn't mean that I keep doing more and more. At some point, I do have to let them take ownership of the work that we're doing too. I always try to make sure I have breaks in my day so that I have that chance to decompress, especially if I'm working with clients who do have those co-occurring issues. And really looking at my priority, what do I need to get done today and what can I, maybe save for a different day so that I'm not working 20, 40 hours every day. Well, not 40 hours, but 20, 24 hours every day. I need to have those breaks throughout and I need to know what I can kind of use and put to the next day. Of course, accept your limitations as well. I know you all probably know as well how hard it is when you lose a case. And so recognizing that you did everything that you can do and remind yourself that you did do everything you can do in this case. And sometimes those cases just aren't going to get the outcome we want. But like Theresa mentioned at the very beginning, sometimes clients don't really care about that. They care that they felt heard and believed throughout the process. So even though it may not be the outcome we wanted, they still may feel like they had a really good interaction with the criminal justice system or the justice system in general because of the work that you did and how you made them feel. And then this last bullet I will tell you is still the hardest for me to this day, especially now that I work from home. Learning to leave work at work and knowing when to just kind of say, this is all I can do in this moment. I need to just let this go for now and take that break. It can be really hard for me. I will tell you, I have a separate office in my house and I really make sure I leave and close that door and I don't open it again for the rest of the night when I'm ready to be done so that I can say, like, I'm done with work. I'm not going to think about it. I'm going to leave it in that room and I will pick this back up tomorrow. And I will tell you, having worked directly with clients with all sorts of trauma and crisis, as well as several clients with suicidal ideations, it's how I've been able to do this work for over 10 years is because I set these boundaries in place so I don't feel that burnout, so I don't feel that compassion fatigue, and really focus on my self-care and my mental health there as well. And if you want to go to the next one, Theresa.
Yeah, thanks, Robin. And I appreciate this, accept your limitations. I think accept your triggers as well. Be mindful of your triggers. There are some types of cases. So my mom was a nurse. I'm going to use her as an example. She was a nurse for like 45 years. She could not work with children because it was just too triggering for her. When she went through her rotation at school, she had to work with kids. She had a really bad experience, a really traumatizing experience. And then she had her kids at home. For her, it was a no-go, but she found the population that she really thrived in working with. And then similar with me when I was practicing, now I don't so much, but there were certain cases that were triggering for me. And then others, even if they might be really intense and traumatizing and like a high potential for secondary trauma, that I thrived in working on. So, and that's okay. That's okay, guys. Like, it's okay to be like, dude, I cannot accept these cases. Like, I can't do it. And, if you're having any issues at your agency where you're not getting support from the supervisor, call me, right? Because we don't want to lose you in this work. I will advocate for you. If there is an area of the law and a population you want to work with, but where you are right now, it's just too much for you and just emotionally, it's okay. You're still an awesome attorney. There's a room for you in this work. How many slides here? Here we go. Okay. So really quickly, this came from the Florida Bar website, and there's a really great, we have our high rates of substance use, suicidality, anxiety, stress, depression. I don't think that right, because of the stuff we're hearing, the stuff we're dealing with, trying to help people with their problems every day, it gets really stressful. There's this Florida Bar, and I haven't checked out, I feel like they updated this in the last couple of months. So I wasn't able to utilize any of these services that they have, but if you check out this website, there's some free therapy you can get. I think it's online or over the phone. You get like 5 free sessions if you want to talk out some things with folks there's a host of other resources on that page. So I definitely recommend it. And this last slide we have is just a slide for resources. Robin, and you guys are going to get this when you were talking. So I looked at one of the questions that came in, and there was a question about if you are on the phone with an elderly person and they express that they're afraid they're going to experience harm from their child, so an adult child, because if that daughter finds out that they reached out to legal aid, does that trigger this ethics rule? What I would say, so that ethics rule is focused on the client perpetuating some harm either on themselves or on somebody else. What I would do in that circumstance is I would talk to the client and ask, kind of walk them through, can I contact, get their consent to reach out to get them help. So they can consent and authorize you to reach out on their behalf. And that's what I would do in that circumstance. And thanks for bringing up that example, because we've talked a lot about interpersonal violence and haven't talked about violence against elderly persons from their family members. And I don't think that's talked about enough. So yes, you can talk to your client, be like, hey, can I reach out and get you some help? I have these resources, XYZ, and engage them in that process to see if you can get them to agree to that. Robin, was there something else? I see you kind of like maybe there's another question.
Not another question. I was just going to say for that, all domestic violence centers cover all forms of domestic violence for advocacy. So this would count, you know, if it's a child to an elderly, whether that's a parent, grandparent, that would count as domestic violence. A lot of their shelters are intimate partner, but in a case like this, that may be something where you could talk with the center, if you get permission, of course, to advocate for them getting into that shelter so that they could be away from the danger, which would be their daughter who might possibly harm them. So again, like that's a resource. And then I will tell you, so our contact information or emails are on the second slide or first slide, one of them. We'll send that out. And then if you do ever feel like you're struggling to find a resource, feel free to reach out to me. While I'm based in Pensacola, we have centers all across the state who have resource books for everything. I mean, I had a center who has a resource for leukemia support groups. So if you are looking for a resource, I can probably help you find it if you can't seem to find it. And then I was just going to mention for the Florida Bar Health and Wellness Center, definitely check out, there's a lot of discounts and things, and one of them I know is the Calm app. I know Calm partnered with the Florida Bar, and you get a discount on their meditation app. I am not a huge meditation person, but they do guided meditation, and I enjoyed those, and I will say they're really good if you like them. So you get, I don't remember how big the discount is, but you get a discount on the app if that is something you're interested in. So definitely just check out that website and really play around with it. And then I know Alexis also dropped for you all the ethics hotline. So if you are experiencing that issue, especially, and you need any kind of resources there, that's also on the Florida Bar website. And that's in the chat as well.
I wanted to say, you know, on that point of meditation, I even recently learned there's something called walking meditation, which I am also not a huge meditator. It takes me a while to calm my mind, but the walking one was really great because it focuses on your steps and it kind of brings your breath to your intention in your body while you're active, which for some people might be easier. Theresa, I was going to go back into that question that we were just discussing, unless you had something you wanted to say before I bring it back there.
No, please.
So I'm looking at the question, and I found it very interesting too. The question says, supposedly an elderly client during an intake phone call expresses fear that her daughter will physically harm her client if her daughter finds out that the client reached out to legal aid. Does the confidentiality rule permit disclosure to a prosecutor? So the question is very specific on disclosure to a prosecutor, and I wanted to talk about this, and I know we are not ethical experts. We are just people navigating this as well, just attorneys. So, you know, I want to give a disclaimer. What we say is not, you know, black and white. That's why I put the Florida ethics hotline in there, because honestly, that's the best resource for you to CYA, to speak to the Florida Bar. I wanted to say that I am an attorney. I was a public defender for 5 years before I did prisoner rights work and then do this. And I always, when I'm trying to make determinations about confidentiality and the breach of confidentiality with harm, is I really look at that word reasonably believes necessary. So the law, the rule says, to the extent that the lawyer reasonably believes necessary to prevent the death or substantial bodily harm to another. And as we all know from law school, the word reasonably is in there for a reason, right? And so, you know, I love the advice about getting consent. That's always an amazing CYA. But I also wanted to point out in this particular question, there's a lot of ifs. If the daughter finds out, if this, and it also turns on the daughter's action, the elderly person saying what another person is going to do. So I wanted to give advice on vet why the person believes that. Has your daughter said something to you that they would do this to you? When did they say that to you? Did they do any overt actions? And this is my like criminal defense background coming out, right? Do everything you can to CYA to find out what is actually reasonable. And I know in my experience, it's good to put that in a case note or something, right? And why you believed it was reasonable or not. Just that way you have something to fall back on, and that you called the Florida hotline, right? Do that too, and call the Florida hotline. And I wanted to share my 2 cents on that because I know how hard this is for everyone involved. And there's no just black and white answer. And I know we all wish that there was. And a lot of the questions and why the impetus of this training really did also come from a lot of folks who are experiencing clients who have suicidal ideations or fear harm happening to them and really feel frozen in what they can do to help. So I really appreciate all of the resources you provided, sort of what you said about supporting a person's belief, not challenging them, trying to get the information, and doing your best as an advocate to get them to services if possible. So I just wanted to share that. I don't always give my 2 cents in the trainings, but this is something that really is not clear cut. And I really appreciate you both braving the storms and the weather to talk about it.
I appreciate you pointing that out, Alexis. And as I mentioned before we started, I'm looking at 3 screens here. So the questions popped up on another one. So I missed the piece about the prosecutor. Specifically. So what I will say to that as somebody who worked with victims of rape and sexual violence is one of my focuses was on their privacy and autonomy. So no, I would never, ever recommend just doing that without their consent. First of all, it's a very rare instance where we move ahead as attorneys and do something without our client consent, right? Like this very extreme situation, they're going to harm somebody or harm themselves, and we have that reasonable belief.
Absolutely.
So no, absolutely not. I would talk them through it. And to Alexis's point too, there are a lot of questions that you need to ask. Because are they, and I would really I would try to connect with an advocate if you can. And I know you can't always, because like Robin has that perspective that I just don't have as an attorney. Do they have a reasonable fear? Is it like, like she's afraid, like, what is she afraid the daughter might do? And Alexis mentioned all these things because I do feel like, and this might be controversial in this space, but it's not always great for people. Somebody who represented rape victims for 9 years, day one, I walked in like, I'm going to be working alongside law enforcement and prosecutors to get the bad guy. Day, whatever, 8.5 years later, however many days that is, when I walked out, most of the time I was battling with prosecutors and law enforcement on behalf of the survivors. So not all the time, but a lot of times. So the systems are not always, our clients aren't always eager to engage systems and institutions in helping them. So please keep that in mind as well. That is a great question. I love the question and the discussion that we had around it. And Alexis, thank you for jumping in because I missed that prosecutor part. And I love that you bring in the public defender hat.
Anytime I can, it's my pleasure. I loved being a public defender, but I will say I loved your piece of advice of, okay, get that consent, but also talk about what are some alternatives? How do we get you out of the house? How do we get you, is there a safe space, safety planning? So it really is a holistic approach. And it's, admittedly hard to think about all of these things all at once, especially when your emotions are getting riled because you're worried about somebody. And that goes back to what we ended with Robin, that the boundaries and the emotional toll that it really does take on us. So, for all of you here, still listening in and those who signed off, the work that you do is not easy. And we hope that this training gave you a little bit of knowledge that you're not alone, that we're all dealing with this in these services, and 2, some tools to really protect yourself and help others in the meantime. And so I don't know if I cut you off, Theresa. I don't know if there was something else that you wanted to say before I do the CLE and all that stuff.
No, you're good. I think I have said plenty and people know how to reach me if they are really interested in hearing me speak more.
Well, I'm always interested in hearing you speak more. So
Oh, thanks,
I
Alexis.
bring you back more and more and more. And Robin, was there anything you wanted to say before I put up the CLE and everything?
No, just thank you all so much, especially those who are able to stay on, and of course, those who will watch the recording. We really enjoy getting to share this information with you all. I know Theresa and I love doing it, so.
Awesome. So I'm trying a new fancy trick where I'm going to put the CLE up. I'm going to share the screen and put the CLE up as well as putting it into the chat. Although maybe I didn't think about that well, because can I chat while this is up? I'm not sure. So what I'll do is I'll say that the reference code for this training was 2207606, N as in Nancy. Did I read that correctly? It's right there. And it is approved for 1 general, 0.5 mental illness, and 0.5 ethics. So now I'm going to turn this screen off, and I'm going to put it into the chat for anyone that might have missed my fancy screen sharing. And the CLE credit code is also in the chat for anyone that wants to copy it quickly. And like I said, it will come to you in an email in 24 hours with a PDF of this presentation. Thank you, Robin and Theresa, for sharing that presentation with us, and a copy of this recording so you can listen and learn again or pick up where you left off. And so with that being said, thank you very much, Theresa. Thank you very much, Robin. And I hope that you guys have an amazing rest of your day and a happy holiday season if I don't talk to you before I rope you in for another training. All right, everybody. Have a good one.
Bye.
Thank you.